My entitled stepsister really thought she won when she demanded my bedroom. But 3 hours alone with a sledgehammer changed absolutely everything in ways none of us could have imagined. It started the day Michaela moved in. She walked through our house like she was shopping for real estate, pointing at rooms and deciding what she wanted. When she got to my bedroom, she stopped in the doorway and her eyes lit up. "I want this room," she announced, like it was that simple. "Why can't I have it?" I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. I'd had that room since I was 5 years old. Mom, and I hung those butterfly decals on the walls together before she passed away. Every single one of those butterflies held a memory of her hands guiding mine, her voice telling me where to place them, her smile when we stepped back to admire our work. "The guest room is next door," I told Michaela, still thinking this was some kind of bonding joke between new siblings. But she wasn't laughing. She turned to Dad with this pouty expression she'd clearly perfected over 17 years. "Pink's my favorite color, and I really love butterflies," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Then she walked right into my bedroom without permission and started running her fingers along my mom's old vanity desk. The one I'd refinished myself, the one that still had Mom's initials carved underneath where she'd signed it as a teenager. "This would be perfect for my makeup collection," Michaela said dreamily. She spun around to face me with the most artificial smile I'd ever seen. "The guest room barely has any closet space. You understand, right? You can consider giving me this room as your gift to me. New family, new beginnings, and all that." I looked at Dad, waiting for him to shut this down immediately. Waiting for him to tell his new stepdaughter that she couldn't just claim someone else's bedroom like it was a hotel room. Instead, he pulled me aside into the hallway, his expression uncomfortable. "Would you mind giving up your room for your new sibling?" he asked quietly. "She really wants it, and I think it would help her feel more welcome in the family." I stared at him in disbelief. "Dad, Mom and I decorated that room together." "I know. Honey, I know," he interrupted, looking genuinely apologetic. "But listen, if you say yes, I'll let you have the entire garage. You can decorate it, renovate it however you want, bring your mom's things down there. Turn it into your own space." I paused, my anger deflating slightly as I did the mental math. The garage was almost 3 times bigger than my bedroom. I'd be the only one on the first floor, away from everyone else. I could actually create something amazing down there, something that was entirely mine. "Deal," I said finally, and I actually hugged him. When Michaela heard I'd agreed to move to the garage, she laughed. Actually laughed in my face. "Have fun in your downgrade," she said sweetly. "I'll take good care of your pink room. Maybe I'll paint over it. Pink's getting kind of childish, don't you think?" I spent 3 months transforming that dusty, oil-stained garage into the room of my dreams. I worked 40 hours a week at the library that summer, every single paycheck going toward materials from Home Depot. I built floor-to-ceiling bookshelves with my own hands, creating a reading nook with oversized floor cushions I'd found at an estate sale and recovered myself. I strung fairy lights between the exposed rafters, creating this magical canopy effect that made the whole space glow at night. I painted the walls this soft cream color and added botanical prints I'd found at thrift stores. Dad helped me install a large window overlooking the garden, cutting through the exterior wall and framing it properly so I could have natural light. I bought a small projector with money I'd saved from birthday gifts over the years and mounted it beside my bed for movie nights. I created a gallery wall with pictures of me and Mom, our beach trip, her birthday dinners, the silly selfie we took while painting my old bedroom pink. Every detail was intentional. Every corner was exactly what I wanted. When I finally finished, all my friends started hanging out there exclusively. They'd text asking if they could come over to the studio, as they started calling it. People at school who I barely knew would ask about it, saying they'd seen pictures on Instagram and it looked incredible. My best friend Sarah literally posted, "Why am I paying rent when this exists?" after spending an evening there watching movies on the projector. But when Michaela saw the finished garage, her face went dark. Like actually dark. All the color drained from her cheeks, and her jaw clenched tight. She stood in the doorway staring at my fairy lights, my bookshelves, my cozy reading nook, and I watched something shift in her expression. She stormed into our parents' room, and I heard her yelling through the walls. She gets an entire studio apartment while I'm stuck in a regular bedroom. This isn't fair. I'm the new sibling. I should get the nice things, right? I should be the one you're trying to impress. My stepmom Adriana's voice drifted down, tired and placating. Maybe we can switch rooms again. One last time. Would that make you happy? But this time, Dad didn't cave. I heard his voice, firm and final. She decorated and remodeled that room on her own with her own money. The garage is hers. You get the pink bedroom that you asked for. End of discussion. Michaela came back downstairs hyperventilating, literally gasping for air as she realized she'd lost. She'd given up my perfectly decorated pink bedroom with Mom's butterfly decals for what she thought would be a pathetic garage, and instead I'd created something 1,000 times better. Fine, she finally choked out. Keep your stupid garage. I don't need it anyway. For the next several weeks, Michaela became absolutely obsessed with improving the pink bedroom. She was determined to outdo my garage, spending hours researching interior design on Pinterest and watching home renovation videos on YouTube. She bought these ridiculously expensive professional LED strips that synchronized to music, changing colors with the beat. She installed a built-in vanity with Hollywood-style lighting around the mirror. She placed a mini-bar cart outside her door stocked with fancy sodas and snacks, like she was running a boutique hotel room. Dad was basically left with no choice but to fund her increasingly elaborate ideas with his credit card. He'd come home from work exhausted, and Adriana would immediately corner him with Michaela's latest need. A new rug, a velvet headboard, a chandelier. He'd just hand over his card, trying to keep the peace. But nothing seemed to satisfy Michaela. She'd drag people upstairs to show off her improvements, practically forcing friends to tour her room. Then she'd storm out, slamming doors, when those same people inevitably asked if they could see the famous garage studio everyone was talking about. "It's fine," she'd say through gritted teeth, her smile not reaching her eyes. "My room is better anyway." But we all knew it wasn't true. No matter how much money she spent, no matter how many expensive decorations she bought, she couldn't recreate what I'd built in the garage. She couldn't buy the vibe, the coziness, the personal touches that made my space special. That's when Michaela decided she needed more space for her creative vision, as she started calling it. She began measuring the wall between the pink bedroom and the guest room, muttering about how much better everything would flow if the two rooms were combined. "Imagine," she'd say, gesturing wildly, "one giant suite, the bedroom section and the sitting room section. It would be like a luxury apartment." Adriana fed into this fantasy, nodding along and saying things like, "You deserve a special space too, sweetie. You shouldn't have to feel less than." Looking back now, I can see how Adriana was enabling every single escalation. Every complaint Michaela made, Adriana validated. Every unfair comparison between our rooms, Adriana reinforced. She never once said, "You have a beautiful bedroom, be grateful." She never suggested that constant competition was unhealthy. Instead, she'd make pointed comments to Dad about how I had too much space, how it wasn't fair that one kid got an entire studio while her daughter had to squeeze everything into a normal bedroom. She'd emphasize the word normal like it was an insult. The tension in our house became unbearable. Mealtimes were silent and awkward. Michaela would glare at me across the table, and Adriana would sigh dramatically whenever anyone mentioned the garage. Dad looked exhausted all the time, like he was being pulled in opposite directions and didn't know how to make everyone happy. Then came the day that changed everything. We were getting ready to leave for my cousin's graduation ceremony on a Saturday afternoon. It was a big family event, the kind where everyone gets dressed up and drives an hour away for the ceremony and dinner afterward. That morning, Michaela came downstairs looking pale and drawn. She put her hand on her forehead dramatically and announced, "I have a terrible headache. I think I need to stay home." Adriana immediately fussed over her, offering medicine and water, asking a dozen questions about her symptoms. Dad looked skeptical but didn't push it. I honestly didn't care one way or another. If she wanted to skip a boring graduation ceremony, that was her choice. I remember seeing Michaela standing at her bedroom window as we packed the car. She was just staring down at us, her expression unreadable. At the time, I thought she looked sad about missing the party. Now I know she was nervous about what she was planning to do. We drove away around noon, and I completely forgot about Michaela within 20 minutes. I was texting friends, listening to music, thinking about literally anything except what was happening back home. What none of us knew was that Michaela had been waiting for this exact moment. The moment when the house would be completely empty. The moment when she could execute her plan without anyone stopping her. According to what our neighbors told police later, Michaela went up to the pink bedroom around 1 o'clock. They heard music start playing, loud enough to vibrate through the walls. Then they heard rhythmic pounding, like someone hammering or hitting something repeatedly. The neighbor, Mrs. Chun, said she almost came over to check but figured Michaela was just being a typical teenager, maybe hanging posters or doing some craft project. The pounding went on for over 2 hours, stopping and starting as Michaela presumably took breaks when her arms got tired. Michaela had taken a sledgehammer, one she'd ordered herself and hidden in her closet, and started hitting the wall between the pink bedroom and the guest room. She wanted to knock it down, turn the 2 spaces into one giant room, create something impressive enough to rival my garage. For about 3 seconds, it worked exactly like she pictured. The drywall crumbled, creating a large opening between the 2 rooms. She probably felt triumphant in that moment, excited about the big reveal when we got home. Then the ceiling beam, no longer supported by the wall beneath it, shifted with a horrible groaning sound. Mrs. Chun said she heard a cracking noise that shot through the neighborhood like lightning. Then came the crash, drywall, insulation, and a massive ceiling joist all coming down at once. Michaela had looked up just in time to see it coming, but she couldn't dive away fast enough. The beam caught her at the base of her skull and pinned her down, trapping her on the floor of her destroyed bedroom. She was conscious the whole time, fully aware, unable to move or call for help. We were 2 hours away, sitting through a graduation ceremony, completely oblivious. Michaela lay there trapped under that beam, trying to scream but only managing weak sounds, feeling her body grow numb and cold, realizing something was horribly, horribly wrong. Mrs. Chin finally called 911 around 3:30 when the dust cloud became visible through our upstairs windows. The paramedics arrived and found Michaela conscious but unable to move anything below her neck. They said she kept whispering, "I can't feel anything. I can't feel my arms. I can't feel anything." She'd been trapped for 3 hours by the time they got to her. We got the frantic call from the hospital around 4 p.m., right as we were sitting down for dinner at the restaurant. Dad's face went completely white as he listened to the person on the other end describe what had happened. We left immediately, barely remembering to tell my cousin congratulations before rushing out. The drive to the hospital was silent except for Adriana's sobbing from the back seat. Dad's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. I sat frozen in the passenger seat, trying to process what they told us, but not fully understanding the severity yet. We spent 6 hours in the waiting room during Michaela's emergency surgery. The fluorescent lights made everyone look gray and sick. Adriana paced back and forth, until a nurse gently suggested she sit down. Dad filled out paperwork with shaking hands, getting the date wrong twice before finally writing it correctly. When the doctor finally came out, his face told us everything before he said a single word. He looked tired and sad, the way doctors do when they have to deliver news that will shatter someone's entire world. Michaela's spine was severed at the C4 vertebra, he said carefully, his voice gentle but clinical. I'm very sorry, but she'll never move anything below her neck again. She'll need a ventilator to breathe properly and 24-hour care for the rest of her life. Adriana's scream echoed through the entire waiting room. It was this primal, animalistic sound of grief that made everyone within earshot flinch. She collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking with sobs. She's 17, Adriana kept repeating. She's only 17 years old. The doctor explained that Michaela would never walk again, never feed herself, never hold a phone or brush her own hair or paint her own nails. She'd be completely dependent on others for every single aspect of her life. Forever. When Michaela could finally speak through the ventilator apparatus days later, she asked to see me specifically. I thought maybe she wanted comfort or support. Maybe she wanted to apologize for all the tension between us. Instead, her voice came through the speaking valve, thin and mechanical, distorted by the machine breathing for her. "This is your fault," she whispered. "You made me feel like I had to compete for space in my own home. Now I'll never paint my nails again, never try on clothes, never hold a phone. I just wanted to belong in this family. The words hit me like physical blows. I stood there next to her hospital bed, staring at her face, trying to find some response that made sense. Before I could say anything, Adriana appeared in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked at me with this expression of pure hatred. "Why couldn't you have just shared your room?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Why didn't you offer to help decorate her bedroom when you saw how much she wanted a cool room too? This is your fault. If you'd just been a better sister, none of this would have happened." Dad stood beside me, saying nothing. Not defending me, not shutting Adriana down, just standing there looking defeated and exhausted. The entire upper floor of our house got sealed off as a structural hazard. The ceiling damage was too extensive for anyone to safely be up there. Michaela had to move into my garage because it was the only space on the first floor large enough for all her medical equipment, the ventilator, the feeding tube supplies, the adjustable hospital bed, the monitors. My beautiful garage studio, the space I'd spent months creating, became Michaela's permanent medical room. And somehow, that felt like the final cruel irony of the whole situation. I was sitting on the floor next to Michaela's hospital bed in what used to be my garage when my phone rang 3 weeks after the collapse. The ventilator made its regular whooshing sound every few seconds, and I'd been counting the cycles without really thinking about it. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. A man introduced himself as Mateo Huang from the insurance company, his voice careful and professional, like he was reading from a script but trying to sound friendly. "We've been doing routine checks on your family's claim," he explained, "and we found something unusual in Michaela's device search history from the week before the accident." My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. "We're reopening the case," Mateo continued, "and we need you to come to the police station this afternoon to answer some questions. Would 2 o'clock work for you?" My hand started shaking, so badly I almost dropped the phone. I managed to say okay and wrote down the address, even though I already knew where the police station was. After I hung up, I just sat there staring at Michaela's face. Her eyes were closed and she looked peaceful, which felt completely wrong given what I'd just heard. I walked into the kitchen where Dad was drinking coffee and Adriana was making toast. I told them about the call. Adriana's face went completely white for about 2 seconds. Then her expression changed to anger, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "What lies did you tell the insurance company?" she demanded. "What did you say to make them suspicious?" Her voice got louder with each word, accusing me of fabricating problems, of trying to make Michaela look bad, of being selfish and vindictive. Dad just kept staring at his coffee mug like it had answers written on the bottom. Finally, he said we should cooperate fully, give them whatever they needed. His voice sounded flat and exhausted, like he'd used up all his energy just getting through the past few weeks. I drove to the police station alone, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The route took me past my old high school, and I remembered how proud I'd felt just a few months ago when I finished the garage renovation. Everyone kept saying it was the coolest room they'd ever seen, better than anything on Pinterest or Instagram. That pride felt poisonous now, sitting heavy in my chest like I'd done something wrong by creating something beautiful. Detective Leilani Santos met me in the waiting area and led me to a small interview room that smelled like old coffee and cleaning solution. She pulled out a chair for me and sat across the table, her expression kind but serious. "This is just an informational interview," she explained. "You're not under arrest or being accused of anything. You have the right to have a parent or attorney present if you want one." "I'll answer questions on my own," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I don't have anything to hide." Detective Santos asked me to describe the family dynamics before the accident, and I tried to explain how squeezed out I felt after Dad married Adriana. How every disagreement seemed to end with Dad giving Michaela what she wanted to keep the peace. How Adriana always took her daughter's side, validating every complaint and making me feel like the enemy. Then Detective Santos pulled out her tablet and turned it toward me, showing me a list of search terms from Michaela's laptop. The searches were dated 5 days before the collapse. How to know if wall is load-bearing. Sledgehammer demolition interior wall. Can you knock down wall between 2 bedrooms? Home renovation without contractor. Each search term felt like a punch to my stomach. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring slightly as I tried to process what I was seeing. "She planned this," I whispered. "She actually planned it." Detective Santos nodded slowly. It appears so. Did you know Michaela was researching construction projects? I shook my head, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. She never mentioned wanting to demolish walls. She just kept complaining that her room wasn't big enough. The detective showed me more searches from 2 days before the accident. Does homeowners insurance cover accidental demolition? And how long does insurance claim take? Michaela hadn't just impulsively grabbed a sledgehammer. She'd researched it, planned it, and calculated that Dad's insurance would cover any damage that went wrong. This wasn't a stupid mistake made in anger. This was premeditated. Detective Santos closed the first screen and opened another, this one showing text messages between Adriana and Michaela from 8 days before the accident. Adriana had written, "You need to make it impossible for them to ignore how unfair this is." Michaela responded, "I have a plan." There were more messages in the thread. Adriana writing about how I got everything I wanted while Michaela got stuck with leftovers. Michaela had sent back room design screenshots with captions like, "This is what I deserve," and "Why does she get the cool space?" I sat there reading these messages, feeling this weird mix of vindication and horror. Here was proof that Adriana had been pushing Michaela, encouraging her escalation, making her feel justified in taking extreme action. "Did your stepmother know about the specific demolition plan?" Detective Santos asked. "I don't think so," I admitted. But she definitely fed Michaela's anger about the rooms. She kept pointing out everything I had that Michaela didn't, keeping score like we were in some kind of competition. The detective made notes and then showed me another finding. The neighbors had given a statement about seeing a delivery truck drop off a package 2 days before the accident. Michaela had signed for it herself. A sledgehammer ordered online using Adriana's credit card. "Your stepmother claims she never approved buying a sledgehammer," Detective Santos said. "She says Michaela must have taken her card without asking." But the credit card records told a more complicated story. Adriana's card had been used to buy the vanity, the LED strips, and the sledgehammer, all from the same hardware store over a 3-week period. Either Adriana was incredibly careless with her credit card, or she knew more than she was admitting. A few days later, Detective Santos called us back to the station. She found more evidence, this time from Michaela's phone on the morning of the actual accident. Michaela had searched how to fake being sick convincingly and best excuses to skip family event the same morning she claimed to have a headache. She deliberately stayed home alone so she could knock down the wall in private. "This shows clear premeditation," Detective Santos explained. "She didn't just impulsively decide to do this. She planned it over weeks, ordered the tools, researched the insurance angle, and created an opportunity to be home alone." Dad's face had gone gray as he listened. Adriana sat completely still, her hands folded on the table, not looking at anyone. Then came the neighbor's statement about the actual demolition. Mrs. Chun had heard music start playing around 1 o'clock, loud enough to vibrate through the walls, then rhythmic pounding for over 2 hours. She'd almost gone over to check, but figured Michaela was just doing some teenager project. "The pounding went on for over 2 hours," Detective Santos read from her notes. Then at 3:30, Mrs. Chun heard a massive cracking noise that made her whole house shake, followed by a huge crash. That's when she called 911. I sat there imagining Michaela swinging that sledgehammer for hours, taking breaks when her arms got tired, then starting again. If Mrs. Chun had just knocked on the door, if anyone had checked on the noise, Michaela might have been stopped before the ceiling came down. But nobody did, and she kept going until the structure collapsed on top of her. A week after showing us all the evidence, Detective Santos called us in for a final meeting. This time, representatives from the insurance company, city building department, and social services were all there. Mateo Huang from the insurance company spoke first, his voice matter-of-fact and businesslike. "Based on the evidence of intentional demolition and unpermitted work, we're denying the structural damage claim. The policy clearly excludes coverage for damage caused deliberately by household members." Dad's pen moved frantically across his notepad, writing down numbers and dates like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. Anders McKay from the city building department went next, listing violations for the unpermitted demolition upstairs and the unpermitted window installation in my garage. "You'll need to hire a licensed contractor, get proper permits, and bring everything up to code within 90 days. The fines totaled $4,000, plus remediation costs. The structural engineer who'd inspected the house estimated repairs at $75,000 to $100,000. Dad's face went gray as he wrote down that number. Detective Santos explained that after reviewing all the evidence, the police weren't recommending criminal charges against anyone. Michaela's already facing life-changing consequences more severe than any criminal penalty. And while the texts show Mrs. Adriana encouraged escalation, there isn't enough evidence that she knew about the specific demolition plan. Mateo confirmed that Michaela's medical care would continue to be covered under the health insurance policy. All her equipment, nursing care, and therapy would be paid for. But the house repairs were entirely our responsibility. Adriana started crying, her shoulders shaking as she covered her mouth with both hands. "I never wanted any of this," she sobbed. "I just wanted my daughter to feel like she belonged." Walking through the parking lot after the meeting, Adriana suddenly grabbed my arm and spun me around. She started yelling that this was still my fault for being selfish and showing off with the garage, for making Michaela feel so worthless she did something desperate. Her voice was loud enough that people getting into their cars nearby turned to stare. "You could have just shared your room from the start," she screamed. "You could have helped her decorate instead of making everything a competition." Then her voice broke and she started sobbing, saying she was terrified of losing Michaela, that watching her daughter trapped in a body that didn't work was killing her. "I can't handle the guilt," she cried. "I didn't know how to fix any of this." Dad gently took Adriana's elbow and guided her toward the car while she cried. He looked back at me once with this exhausted expression, like he was carrying something too heavy but couldn't put it down. That evening, Dad called a family meeting. He told us he was taking a leave of absence from work to focus on the remediation project and Michaela's care. He'd already contacted a contractor and set up a payment plan with the city for the fines. His voice was steady and clear, not shaky like it had been for weeks. Having concrete tasks seemed to give him something solid to hold on to. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly. "I'll help with Michaela's care and cooperate with the house repairs, but I'm not going to be the only caregiver or the family's punching bag anymore. I need you both to acknowledge that I didn't cause this. Michaela made her own choices, and the consequences are hers to live with." Dad nodded slowly. Adriana looked away toward the window but didn't argue. It wasn't a big emotional breakthrough, just a simple statement of boundaries that needed to be said. The next few months were a blur of contractor visits, permit applications, and caregiver training sessions. Dad and I spent 40 hours learning ventilator management, feeding tube care, and how to prevent bed sores. Adriana was supposed to attend but kept calling in sick. A social worker named Royce Booker set up a care plan with 12 hours of daily in-home nursing care covered by Medicaid. Professional aides would cover 8 in the morning to 8 at night, and family members would split the overnight shifts. Royce also brought adaptive technology, a tablet Michaela could control with her eye movements, and a better speaking valve for the ventilator. The garage started to feel slightly less like a hospital room and more like a functional living space. The contractor finished installing proper support beams upstairs, and the city inspector approved the work. Dad actually framed the inspection approval certificate and hung it in the hallway, proof we were fixing things, proof we were moving forward instead of drowning. I started researching colleges with strong disability support services, schools within an hour of home, so I could still help with Michaela's care while building my own life. Dad helped me fill out applications and said he was proud of me for not giving up on my future. 3 months after the collapse, our house settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal on good days. Michaela had her care routine, the upstairs repairs were progressing, and we had systems in place. Money was tight and would be for years. The home equity loan payment showing up on Dad's bank statement every month was a constant reminder of the cost of Michaela's choices. One evening, I decided to reclaim a small piece of the garage for myself. I moved some of Michaela's equipment to one side and cleared out a corner near the window. I brought down the shelf Dad had built for me years ago and placed my framed photos of Mom on it. Our beach trip, her birthday dinners, the silly selfie we took painting my old room pink. Michaela watched me through her eye gaze tablet, her eyes following my movements. I walked over to her bed and told her I wasn't trying to take over her space, just claiming a tiny corner. Her eyes blinked twice, our signal for yes. The next day, I brought my nail polish collection to her bedside. I painted her nails slowly and carefully while a comedy movie played on the projector. We didn't talk much, just existed in the same space without anger or blame hanging between us. Through her speaking valve, Michaela's voice came out thin and mechanical. I wanted the attention your garage got. I felt invisible and thought a dramatic transformation would make me special. I didn't mean for things to end up like this. She stopped short of apologizing, but it was something. I told her I knew she'd felt invisible, that I was sorry she felt that way, but what happened wasn't my fault. I explained that I would help take care of her because she was family, but I couldn't fix the past. We both have to live with what happened now, I said. The only way forward is being honest about what we can and can't give each other. She blinked slowly, and I thought maybe she understood, even if she couldn't fully accept it yet. Family relationships were still fragile. Conversations between Adriana and Dad were careful and formal. But we had systems in place, and everyone was trying in their own way. The insurance company, despite denying the structural claim, provided a $15,000 equipment stipend for Michaela's adaptive technology. It wasn't much compared to what we'd lost, but it covered a ceiling lift system and better ventilator equipment. Dad actually smiled when he read that part of the letter, the first real smile I'd seen from him in weeks. I started college applications, focused on schools with disability studies programs. I wanted to understand what Michaela was going through, to be better equipped to help not just her, but others facing similar challenges. Dad read through my essay about family challenges and told me he was proud. I realized I could be part of his family and still have boundaries, still have my own goals and dreams. Michaela will always be paralyzed, always need the ventilator and feeding tube and round-the-clock care. Some days are harder than others, days when the reality of what happened crashes down on all of us like that ceiling beam crashed down on her. But we're all still here, still trying, still figuring out how to live with the consequences of choices made in anger and fear and desperation. There are no heroes or villains in this story, just a family trying to survive a tragedy that never should have happened, learning to set boundaries while still showing up for each other. The garage, my beautiful studio that became a hospital room, represents everything that went wrong and everything we're trying to make right. It's where Michaela lives now, surrounded by equipment that keeps her alive. But it's also where I painted her nails, where we watched movies together without fighting, where small moments of peace happened despite everything. Dad hung a new calendar in the kitchen with color-coded schedules for nursing shifts, therapy appointments, permit inspections, and my school events. Seeing everything laid out visually helped everyone feel less overwhelmed. We knew who was responsible for what and when. Adriana slowly started participating more in Michaela's care. Though she and Dad still moved around each other carefully, their relationship damaged but not completely broken. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means choosing not to let someone else's choices destroy your future. I'll never forget what Adriana said in that parking lot, the blame she piled on me. But I also understand she was drowning in guilt and grief and needed someone to be angry at. The sledgehammer that caused all this sits in evidence storage at the police station. Sometimes I think about it sitting there in a plastic bag with a tag, this ordinary tool that destroyed a family in 3 hours of poor decisions. The butterfly decals from my old bedroom are gone now, covered by Michaela's LED strips. But I carry the memory of hanging them with Mom, and no renovation or tragedy can take that away from me. We're not okay, but we're trying, and some